Thank you. Thanks for this invite and the opportunity to talk to you about this topic. I will introduce it as well. So my name is Marija Slavkovik. I'm a professor of information science, I think, at the University of Bergen in Norway. And normally I do research in artificial intelligence pure and in collective reasoning and decision making and machine ethics. How do you automate moral reasoning is the topic that I'm curious about. But I will talk to you here about a paper that we did. It's from last year, basically, it was published last year, which we call digital voodoo dolls. And right away, I have to start with excuses. This is an epic epistemic trespassing on my end, doing this work, because the work is basically, well, it's very hard to pin down which discipline it belongs to. And I thought it would be perfect for your seminar. And also I have, yes, apart from presenting it at the conference, I never really kind of included it in any of the talks. So I'm very excited to talk about this, that I really believe in a lot. So this is a joint work with Clemens Stachel, who is now at the University of St. Gallen. At the time he was in Stanford. He is a psychologist, or rather computational psychologist. So he studies how do you recover personality traits from data traits? And I'm butchering his work here. And Jon and Caroline, they are both from the Catholic University of Washington, and they are in Washington, and they are studying political science. And we got together in order to describe these concepts, which we call digital voodoo dolls, which we thought was a very peculiar concept, that we thought that there is this phenomena that occurs on the fringe between all of our disciplines that doesn't have a name. And you may have recall this concept of digital voodoo dolls being mentioned by Tristan Harris, I think is his name. He's this guy in Silicon Valley who studies stuff related to AI ethics. And it's only after we kind of created this work, we became aware that the concept has already been taken. So you can see this work as refining this idea of digital voodoo dolls. And I will tell you what this is. So this is basically a type of a user model that we see is made available to be used by virtues of having artificial intelligence and big data at the same time. So I will gently kind of ease you into this whole, what is the issue, the concept itself, what did we do, what did we think we did worse or bad, and why is this a problem that we think should be discussed in the context of AI ethics and responsible use of technology in society. So let's talk about data, and let's talk about artificial intelligence. So particularly when we are talking about issues that somehow impact society with this technology, we talk about data protection or privacy. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about artificial intelligence ethics, humane artificial intelligence, responsible artificial intelligence, these kinds of things. So if two things are spoken about together very frequently, they must be connected. And I find it often that people find it very hard to unpack artificial intelligence and data science. They're two different fields. One uses the other. They use each other, but they're two different fields. But let's unpack them a little bit. What is data, and why does it need protecting in the first place? Simply put, data is an individual fact or a statistics or item of information. So it's kind of like a small unit of information. So of course, here we are interested in digital data. So digital data, then very simply put, if you want to read the definition from Wikipedia on the left, that's one thing, but practically for all intents and purposes, it's basically data that can be created and processed by a computer. So how does it differ from data that is, non-digital? So this is a picture from a room very much adjacent to where I'm sitting right now. And it's basically structured information, if you like. If I were to give you this information, this physically recorded information that exists in these folders here, I would need to give you the key to the room on the 5th floor of my building where these folders are. So that room, you have to trust me on this, fits only around 5 people, non-COVID regulated. If the same. So if for you to be able to access this data, that will be 5 at a time, right? And if you want to share it with somebody, then you would need to kind of take the folder, either copy it down the hall or just give it to someone. And then while one person reads it, another person can't read it. If the same data were digital on my phone or on my computer here, I could just send it all to you in the chat of this Zoom talk. And you will have it within seconds, and you can share it with other people, and several people can read it at the same time. And I do not need to explicitly give you permission what to do with it. You can do with it what you want. You will own a copy of it. So when we talk about privacy of data, we are basically concerned about what happens when ownership of that data somehow becomes obfuscated by that data now being digital, and all the things that we couldn't do with physical data, we now can do with ease, such as share it, give access, manipulate it, process it, and all that stuff. So we are then concerned who has access to this data. We are concerned what does this data reveal and to whom, right? So it's all about access control and what people do with the data and how they use it. And we are typically concerned about privacy. So there are two types of, at least I would say, I've been told there are philosophers on the chat, so one has to be careful. There are two types of privacy we try to accomplish when working with data. One is the access and use control of specific data, and the other one is access and use control of data patterns. So let me just explain a little bit what that is. So specific data is, for example, name, social security number, phone number, your bank account, where do you live, what did you have for breakfast, specifically for one person. And we are concerned, of course, because information that is given in one context freely, where it makes sense, maybe just easily because we are not paying attention, be ported to a different context in which having access to that information is neither needed nor beneficial to anybody. Well, I mean, to the person who has supplied the data. So think, for example, this case in which we were talking about the dating app Grindr. This is a case that the Norwegian Data Authority actually sued the app for. So Grindr is an app that facilitates, they are specialized for homosexual relationships. And the app requires HIV status to be declared for the users. Now, when you are engaging in a sexual relationship with somebody, HIV status information is very relevant, and some people are explicitly do not want to engage with sexual relations with people who have HIV. Other people do not have these views, but it is, you can imagine that this is a bit of information that is very personal, but also relevant to be shared in this particular context. Now, the problem was that that same information would then make part of a data unit, so to speak, and shared outside of the context. So whether or not you are HIV positive is not something that your employer necessarily needs to know, right? Or the shop that is selling you a car needs to know. So this is the type of a very private, the example of a very private data that needs to, it makes sense to be shared in a particular context, but it becomes questionable whether it is needed to or allowed to be shared in a different context. So privacy of data is a concern, and this is a concern which we have spent a lot of time dealing with. And so there are many approaches that have been proposed, and some of them efficient, some of them not efficient. Of course, they're all in their nascency, so it's very difficult to say there exists a solution and this problem is solved. It's not, but there exist ideas as to how to address this problem, and this is specifically regulation, differential privacy. So regulations such as GDPR builds laws that say, okay, it is illegal for you to use this data or to collect this data or to, allow this data to leave the domain, this domain for that domain. So redefining the laws in order to make certain things clear and also actionable, that one should do them or not do them. Differential privacy is a very mathematical modeling of the idea of privacy, which tries to find ways that when you collect information in the first place, identifying that information has noise added to it, so that identifying specific data parts of it, datum for people, does not exist, is not collected in the first place. Now, in addition to privacy of specific data, the lesser talked about topic, and this is the one we actually were concerned about when we started talking about our paper, was the access, use, and control of applicable data patterns. So what is happening is actually that not only that is a specific data that can be accessed because of the nature of digital data and digitalization in general, but also applicable data patterns. So what are applicable data patterns? So for example, a data pattern is what depressed female people search for on the internet. So applicable data pattern means I can apply the fact that what I uncover is that the fact that I can apply this data pattern to you. So that means saying something like having information such as you search the internet for things that depressed female people search for. And what is concerning about this is this does not really create the same damage to you as, for example, leaking your credit card number being shared, but it is uncomfortable at best and potentially worrying and dangerous at worst. And the reason we are concerned that I, for example, and was concerned about this was because you cannot just stumble upon the pattern of data. A data pattern needs to be created, and then you need to somehow use computational means to check whether this pattern applies to some specific person. So let me tell you a little bit about artificial intelligence that I'm sure you know. Artificial intelligence studies how to use computation to automate tasks that require intelligence. And one such task is pattern recognition. So AI can very efficiently find patterns in data. So we have one situation in which data is being digitalized, and a lot of data that is, a lot of events that used to be private, that used to be not data creating events, all of a sudden are data creating events. And on top of that, you have the ease of sharing and multiplying and processing data. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is you have artificial intelligence, which is extremely good at finding patterns of data in the data. So what can you do with patterns? You can do many things with patterns, but the things that we are interested in was what you can do with, how can you use patterns to identify or predict behavior of people. So this is where the co-author with psychology background comes in. So one example is this. You may have missed this, but you may have seen something that is similar. So this is an example in which the pattern connection is connecting students' eye movements while they watch a video on a particular topic, very important for their class, and their performance on the test on that topic later on. So you're finding you are creating data that is the eye movements of the students watching a video, and then you are finding patterns in the data. You're seeing what connects the students who performed extremely well. So the eye movement data of the students who performed well on the exam, and the eye movement data of the students who performed poorly on the exam. And what do you then do with this data pattern? Well, you basically can build a model that takes on input eye movements and predicts whether the student will behave well on the exam, or will have good results on the exam or not. And what do you do then with that information? Well, you can see, okay, I predict that this student will be struggling, therefore I will start paying more attention to the student and make sure they have more resources and so on. That is at least the noble intention. Another pattern that is less reliant on new data to be created specifically for you to find pattern with it is, for example, are you likely to buy a boat? So this is an example. The table on the right is from a textbook. And so having some information about a bunch of people who have boats and people who have not bought boats, I can extract the pattern and say, well, you know, if you are above a certain age and you have a certain amount of children and you're divorced and you don't have a dog, then you're very likely to buy a boat. So what do I do with this information? Well, I mean, I can use it when I see whether you match the pattern of a both buyer, then I can send you brochures about both. But the other thing I can do is, for example, is make sure that if you do happen to stumble upon my online shop for boats, I can just not show it to you. So I can kick you out of my webpage for selling you boats, because I know your data pattern tells me that you're belonging to the data pattern of both buyers, or rather you're not belonging to the data pattern of both buyers, tells me that you're not likely to buy a boat. So what are you doing on my webpage? Well, you might have some nefarious intentions, and maybe it's better that you don't see the webpage in the first place. And if I have some, tours or organized on the boat, and some affordances for people who are likely to buy the boat, like they can borrow the boat and drive it around and so on, then I would be interested in you, the person who is not likely to buy a boat, to not be shown this webpage in the first place. Now, this is a point of concern, because it changes the reality for people. There are people in which shops for boats exist in the reality, and there are people for which shops for boats do not exist into their reality. So there are issues with data pattern affiliation, specifically affiliating people with particular data patterns. So of course the issue is what purpose is the data pattern for what purpose is the data pattern created in the first place, or identified is rather the word, by whom, what do they want to do with it? So one example of using data to create data patterns and concerns around this problem is the concern that we all saw rising with cookies. And I think this is, and what was at the time the flock system that Google wanted to introduce and they gave up on. And I found that this tweet actually best describes the concern of being affiliated with a particular data pattern. And this says third-party cookies are like post-it notes written by strangers stuck to your forehead. They contain detailed, sensitive, often misleading info about you in an undecipherable language. You try to remove them, but some just reappear. People read them and treat you differently. Post third-party cookie alternatives like Flock are the same, but don't worry, they guarantee that there are a few thousand other people with the exact same notes on their foreheads. So apart from these concerns of, why is this data pattern created in the first place, and by whom, and what do they plan to do with it, there is also the concern of, is it based on correct data? Because sometimes I search for things on the internet because I'm curious. Sometimes I search for things on the internet because my partner asked me to search for them. Or maybe somebody walked into my office and said, can you please look this up? But that then will become digital trace of mine that will be taken into consideration, and I will use to match me with a particular pattern. But then it is not my behavior that is matched. It is the behavior of me and whoever happened to run into the office while, this data was being tracked in a way. So is the data pattern built on correct data? Is it applied correctly? So is it the case that when I'm tested whether or not I fit this pattern, right? Do I really fit this data pattern? Is it the case that are the stickers really just on my face, or some of the stickers are on air that don't belong to my face? And on top of this, there is another concern that is, well, hang on. It's one thing if a data pattern is being built and it is attached to me in order for you to learn something about people, or for you to learn something about what has worked and what has not worked. But it is a completely different thing to build a data pattern that somehow predicts my behavior, and then to tailor the services that are available, not to me, but to this predicted version of me, which may, I remind you, be built using incorrect information, random information that doesn't apply to me whatsoever. So this would be like, instead of having post-its on your face that some people stuck and you cannot remove, they are not on your face whatsoever. They're just data traces that are somehow look like you in a way, but are not are not you. This is past information about yourself that is somehow attached to you, that has somehow been created in relation with you, but it is not you. But then data services, digital services or digital-based services are tailored not to you directly, but to this model of you in a way. So this is the model of you that we decided to call a digital voodoo dolls, because instead of nail clippings and hair and whatever one does in order to build an actual voodoo doll, you use data traces to build a representation of the real person. And then in the same way that, a voodoo practitioner or whatever you call these things would hurt the doll or, apply certain activities on the doll and you feel it, right? At least that's the idea in science fiction. In the same fashion, things are applied to the digital model of you and you do feel the effects. If you are banned out of both stores, you feel the effects. There is a specific case of an example that we link in the paper to, about a person being banned out of Airbnb because it was assumed that they will engage in sex trade while they are a guest at the Airbnb. And it is assumed by analyzing their information they post on Twitter. And it was particularly wrong because they were doing it in order to raise funds for something else. Anyways, so basically what we're talking about then is a new kind of a user model. So it is now possible due to digitalization and due to artificial intelligence, being very good at finding patterns in data, to create a complex high fidelity model of a person. And we call this model a digital voodoo doll. And as I said, instead of nail clippings and strands of the hair, it's constructed from what content you liked, how long you took to respond to a message. And of course, since this is the model, this is the user model to which services are tailored, whatever holds for the doll is actually applied as if it held to you. So a digital voodoo doll models not only who you are, but also what it is most likely that you will do. So rather not who you are, but who you were, and what is most likely that you will do. So this model is made possible by, of course, vast amount of data, and what services are offered or denied are based on this model as well. So if whether or not you're going to be given access to particular service or particular level of service, what price you may get for a particular service that is dynamically priced will be tailored to what we call this user model, which we call a voodoo doll. Whether or not you're going to have access to a lot of help in your studies or little help in your studies depends on the model, the predicted behavior by some system. So the doll of you rather than you. So what we try to unpack in the paper, and this is our contribution, is basically to see what is the difference between this new user model and existing user models. So we took a very, perhaps a little bit too broad reach for this user models. You observe that whenever you're interacting with some kind of a thing that is not a person, so when you have interaction that's not person to person, you need to use some representation of yourself. So institutions, they don't interact with you as a person, they interact with some model of you. So for example, states, they interact with the model of you that is captured in a citizen record, which may have unique identifying number, address, birth date, these kinds of stuff. We are now connected here, but we are not interacting directly with each other. Basically, each of us is a port in a way. It's a gate, and there is a connection established between these gates. So we have a profile that models us in a way. And we have certain control over changing this profile or not. Another example would be of user models is you change what service is available depending on who you are. So here, student view will tell me how this web page looks if I am a student at the university and what I'm looking at it as a person who has lecturer user privileges, as it were. Of course, you can also, this is an example from a campaign that Signal ran against Facebook, so as it were, but what it illustrates is what is called, sorry, I'm looking at my slides, something is going wrong here. What is illustrating is basically an audience, a lookalike audience. So you want to advertise your product to a particular type of person. So what that type of person is identified by the company, and then that wants to do the advertisement. And if you match this type of person, then you will be given this particular stream of advertisements, as it were. If you match another type of person, you will be given a different stream of advertisements. So the types here are given underlined. So K-pop loving, you are in Berlin, you have had a new baby, you have just moved, and you are doing pregnancy exercises. So this is basically a model of a user to which you want this commercial to be shown. The context of this actual example is a little bit different. So the Signal was trying to say that they do not type you as a particular person. They don't process your information to know what type of person you are. They are the same for everyone. And the last one that I had here, which I wanted to show you, is like, you may have seen it, but this picture has gone completely wrong on the slide. Let me just fix that for a second. Is you see this as well. Skip. Is basically who you're watching, right? Who is watching. So you may want to, this is the same type of user modeling that is being used to tailor services as the example with the, let me show it here, as this example, right? Because if you are my regular customer, then you have a bunch of shows that you have already watched, and I want to show you those because, you know, I want to show you shows that are relevant to you. But if you are a new customer, then you need to identify yourself either as an adult or a child customer, because if you're a child, then I'm not going to show you certain content that doesn't have PG clearance for your age. So there is a good reason why we create models of people, and then these models of people have a different level of detail, information included about that person, but they also have another aspect of them that is important, and that is, how does the information that you use to model the person for the purpose of interacting with a particular institution or a service, how is it changing? Who has the right to change it? So this is what we looked at. So we looked at all the basically user models that we could think of. And so these are here. And we were looking at how do they relate with the institution for which they were created in a way, how permanent they are, how often do the information about them changes, basically, who can create or delete this model, who can edit the information of this model, and what is generally the purpose of it. So identifying models, this is like passports and ID cards and driving licenses. There's one-to-one, so they're created basically to interact directly the person with the institution. So the passport is, you have one passport for one country, you do not have several passports from the same country, for example. And then you cannot share a passport with another person. Is basically, that's why it's one-to-one. You cannot share a passport with another person, and you cannot have two passports with the same institution, which is the country in this case. The permanence is strong, which means that you have one record as a citizen, and it doesn't just change or go away unless very exceptional circumstances happen. The institution itself is the one that creates and deletes this model of you. The information can be edited by the person, but there is a process. You have to apply to the institution needs to approve this, and then the edit happens. And the purpose is, of course, to assign rights and obligations within the context of the institution for which this identifying model was created in a way. So then we have a user account. So a good example is that HBO Max user account that you saw there. So basically I can have I can only have one user account with HBO Max, of course, using one email service. If I want to have several accounts, I have to change my identity in a way. I have to pretend to be more than one person. But two people then can share the account, as it were. So me and my husband, we don't have two HBO Max accounts. We are both Marija watching at the same time, in a way. The permanence is weak, meaning that they can go in and out of existence almost arbitrarily. I can stop my account at whatever point. I can be banned from the service at whatever point. And it is me personally, typically, that can create or delete this account. I need to approach the institution, make the account. And I am the one who can edit it. Of course, the institution itself, in some circumstances, can cancel my account, but they have to have a good reason to do that. And the purpose is, of course, interaction, the exchange of goods and services here. We have a verified account, which is similar to the user account. The only distinction here is that you really can have only one verified account, whereas here you may cheat a little bit. I can create several email accounts and then open a new profile for each of them with HBO Max. Whereas with a verified account, there is some kind of an identifying information included in the model of the user model to ensure that it's really only one person that is using this. Then we have the user model. And this is something for which you do not need to specifically do anything as a person. This is something that a designer of a system will create and say, well, let's say this is a web page. What type of people visit this web page? So you will try to group them somehow with respect to the interest that they have, and say, well, okay, people who are coming outside of the European Union, they don't need to be shown the cookie consent notice. People who come from European Union need to be shown cookie consent notice. Or it could be that you are running, for example, a newspaper, and there's particular news that are of interest to particular people in a particular area. So you may want to tweak what you show as content to the particular user type. So we say this is many to many because I can fit in several of these user models, and the institution itself can have several user models. It's dynamic because it is generated. You basically analyze your users and then group them into different user models, and then you tweak your service for it. The institution is the one that creates these user models, but the person themselves can edit it. So, for example, if I have a web page and I have I'm showing different information to different people depending on their IP address and where they are located, I can change that as a user. Say, well, I want to, for example, be given the information, even though I'm in Norway right now, I want to be given the information as if I were in Germany. Or, for example, even though this is a good example, even though I'm in Norway right now, I actually don't read Norwegian, I read English, so I can change the language on the web page, right? Even though I'm initially shown a Norwegian web page, I can change the language on the web page into English, and that puts me in a completely different user group, and the service is tailored. The purpose, of course, of this is personalization. So you want the service to be most usable to the person that is accessing it, and since different people have different needs, you're personalizing the service to the needs of a particular person. So the one that is not really like the others is a lookalike model. This is something that Facebook introduced. So what they wanted here was to have to be able to sell to their customers who buy advertisement placement and slots and schedules, whatever they call these things, from them, to sell them who this advertisement is going to go to, who is going to see this advertisement. So then a lookalike model is basically what is your target audience. And as a person here, even though this is created by the institution who commissions the services, the difference here is this institution is the institution that offers the service. This institution is the third institution that buys services from the institution who actually creates or has creation power over this model. But you still can, as a person, edit which lookalike model you belong to. You are not going to be able to do this in such a direct way as with a user model. You may need to do indirect methods. So for instance, if I don't want to be shown things that, if I don't want to be shown content that is applicable to women of my age, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the information about me on the web page to misrepresent my gender and misrepresent my age. So specifically, concrete example, I did this with Google. I had infinite commercials on YouTube about pregnancy tests and baby diapers and all kinds of things like this, baby formula and so on. And I got really much fed up of this content. So what I did is basically declared myself as a 65-year-old male in my Google account. And what I got is targeted advertisements for cruises and very late at night hot singles in my area. But I don't know whether I won that one or not. But that is the lookalike model. And the digital voodoo doll on top of this one is specific because it is one-to-one. It is specific to one person, and you specifically create this model to fit one person. I predict your behavior. I don't predict the behavior of a bunch of people like you, but your behavior. It is dynamic. It means that you can recreate it whenever you want, as many times as you want. It is cross-institutional construct because I can take data from one institution to build a prediction model. I can sell the prediction model to a third institution that will apply it to your data, that will predict your behavior, and then tailor the services to this behavior. And what is specific and particularly worrying about the digital voodoo doll is that nobody can edit it, because to edit it means to change the prediction model, which is constructed by training data, which is collected who knows how. So I cannot tweak this. I do not even know as a user that a digital voodoo doll is created, and this is what the services are being tailored for. And the reason of the purpose for creating is to nudge you towards a particular behavior, or to show you a particular option architecture, which means that if you are a customer that is likely to use my room-based renting service for things I don't approve of, then I'm going to give you a prohibitively expensive price for this service so that you just go away, or I'm just going to not show you availability at all. So to summarize, a voodoo doll is unique to a person because it is generated by feeding the features of a specific person to one or several prediction models. It includes identifying information. It is dynamically generated. It's a cross-institutional construct because it can be constructed from data left across several services by an enterprise that the model person has never necessarily used themselves. It exists because the data that is needed to create it exists. So even if you delete one model, you can recreate it very easily. And you cannot change it without removing or changing the digital traces that have already been left or in circulation in a way. It is used as a representation of a person. It is analyzed to access to which extent can the associated person be trusted, to assign other personality traits or profiles to this person, to infer possible future behavior in given context, or to assign, and this is the thing that you will be familiar with, social score or a risk score or a client score to them. So the animations that I should have used, but are otherwise not, I don't think have a lot of information to add. So what we didn't do very clearly in the paper, but I think it should be emphasized, there is a lot of literature that studies digital identities. So how having these digital traces left around, or having a life that is monitored or supervised or somehow online changes us. And these examples include, but are not limited to, data doubles that are introduced by Lyon Rupert, algorithmic identity introduced by Cheney Leipold, what is called profiles by Greg Elmer. So all these things, they talk about my identity as a person in a digital world. And what we were talking about here is human-computer interaction. So basically a model that is created of me that is used then to tailor my reality, at least online, and the issues that come with it. Of course, what makes it more confusing is that this, in reality, the digital voodoo doll does also have aspects of these digital identity concepts that have been discussed. So to just clarify a little bit this, here is the nice diagram that we wrote about what is a digital voodoo doll. It is a dynamically generated digital information construct that models a person and their intentions. So it is constructed from a collection of data created from digital traces, estimates derived by comparison with other data from other people, and outputs from a machine learning algorithm. So basically, to create the digital voodoo doll, my data traces are being processed by some prediction model that basically constructs what my future intentions or behavior will be like. And to build this prediction model, I have taken data traces from people that are somehow by some criteria similar to me. Now, what happens is, because this thing is then used to tailor services to me, it impacts what I can choose from. So then I behave in a spectrum, in a field that my basically digital voodoo doll allows. And that behavior then also leaves digital traces that are then used to train maybe other models, to build other prediction models to be used for other purposes. So why does this all matter? It matters because it directly, when I am tailoring services to not a user model that is really fitted to me, but some kind of a prediction of who I will become, it directly impacts my autonomy. So it violates my autonomy. So autonomy, as a value, is basically the state or condition of self-governance or leading one's own life according to reasons, values, or desires that are authentically one's own. So I cannot have my own desires, I cannot have my own reasons if all I'm seeing is what tailored to somebody else's desires and reasons. I don't choose from the full selection of options. I only choose for those who are presented to me based on my digital voodoo doll. And it also impacts on freedom, because then I'm not necessarily free to walk into a store and buy a boat, as it were. I may be stopped physically from entering the boat store and browse boats and maybe save all my extra funds to buy this boat, even though I'm not the type of person that is likely to buy a boat, as it were. And further, to quote Dumbledore, it is beyond this very strict impact on these two ethical values that we like, freedom and autonomy. It is not our abilities who show what we truly are, it is our choices. And if we judge people, if we tailor things to people by estimates of their abilities, we limit their freedom to choose to surpass them. So this was, in a very messy way, my slides and this idea of digital voodoo dolls, this construct, and how we try to define it. I see that there is a question perhaps in the chat. I will stop sharing the slide so we can see this. If you are somewhat, so this was a very, it was an event that we have observed, and we wanted to kind of make sense of it, and we tried to give it a name, and we tried to define it a little bit closely. And there are aspects of this paper in which we think we succeeded doing that, and this is comparing to other user models that are considered in human-computer interaction specifically. And there are aspects in which we failed, and that is the aspects where this user model basically interacts with issues of identity and concepts of self in the digital world. So we'll see here, there is okay, there was not a question, somebody had to go. Okay, so thanks everyone. And if you have questions, please, should I stop sharing here or?
Yeah, that would be perfect if you could, so we can.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting. And indeed, this is the moment when we can get some questions from the audience. Dear audience, it's yours. Yes, Mel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you can. All right. Let me maybe take back the hand. Thank you very much for this presentation. This was very much music to my ears, since you mentioned the many people who try to talk about identity in the digital words, data doubles, digital identity, algorithmic identity, profiles, and so on. I've myself committed another name for this in a book that is under submission, which is institutional identity. And the way that this form of digital identities are to be put in a long history of institutional identity, that is the image that institutions build of us. And I can see you made a very nice typology of the different forms of identity, in the sense of who create them for what, and under which conditions, and so on and so forth. I was wondering, what were your thoughts about two other dimensions, at least, to that kind of typology? So the first is the aim of the institution when they build this. Okay, so if you look at citizens' records, for instance, in the long run history of the state, one of the main goals is fiscal perception, right? I need an identity of you to take your money as taxes. That's basically family names in many countries, including China, a large part of Europe, were created for fiscal purposes. People did not have family names. Family names were created by the state, imposed by the state, for you to have an identity, for me to take money from you. So that's the institution looks at you with a very particular goal in their heads, and it determines what they look at and what they do with it. And I would guess that the dominant use of that now is targeted advertising, by a long shot, even though it's hard to make proportions of such a gigantic field. But targeted advertising is really the name of the game now. So the question is, what does it change when the institutional goal is changed to? And the second is the scope. I mean, we are getting close to having an entire environment shaped for targeted, advertising purposes. Not only what we see online, but I mean, even if you look at the state of the press, we know that many articles that are presented as, news are actually native advertising. It's a thinly veiled secret that some articles are being bought for as advertisements by companies now and presented as reportage. So basically, and you can see also the same thing in urban geography and all of that. So the scope itself is a problem. And now what is left in our environment that is not a form of advertising, I would say someday. So how do you react to those two dimensions, the goal of the particular goal of the institution, and how far its scope should be allowed to go?
So I think you're pointing at something that we didn't do, right? So this is a bit of a, so for me, it's very weird presenting this work, to be honest. I feel like super trepidatious, because it's not my field at all, right? But you pointed something that we didn't do, and that is I spoke about concerns with specific data, leaving the context in which it was granted creation permissions, and to be used in a different context where their use is not either approved nor beneficial, right? And what we didn't consider is that same thing can actually apply to the user model. So the identity, which is like the information about me that the bank has, which is the profile that has certain privileges, such as spending the money, right? The moment when that is leaked out of the bank to somewhere else, somebody can inhabit that identity and then behave as if it were me and spend my money, as it were. And but what is interesting is that it is not just about targeted advertising. It is about targeted service in a way, and it is about changing we called it option architecture, but it's basically what is going to be the amount of information available in the internet is vast, and nobody can actually sort this out or find something they are looking for without some pre-selection that is done by some algorithm. Now, the problem becomes when that pre-selection is, well, it's never neutral, but when it becomes particularly not neutral is when the problem. The examples that come to my mind is this, I think it was Amazon same-day delivery maps that had like, you have same-day delivery within this particular area, but then there is this island in the middle of that area where they don't do same day delivery. And then you will say, well, what is the issue here? It's obviously not geographically, if you can reach everything around it, you can reach that as well. And then they found out these are poor neighborhoods in which, you know, they expect some kind of bad behavior and they don't want to sell to them at all. So, and I think what is specific about the digital voodoo doll concept is that it just makes it so easy for that pattern to leave one context to another context. So that example that I mentioned about this woman who was denied services with Airbnb, she ran a campaign for collecting money. Now I don't remember for which cause. So if you donate, she will send you a naked picture of herself. And she's not a person who was in the sex trade otherwise. She just thought this is a very fast way to collect this money. And the call was very noble. But then because there was so much nudity about her online in Twitter, and Twitter has nothing to do with Airbnb, the Airbnb ran through her through their models and say, well, I mean, you're very likely to use this for sex trade. So therefore, we're not going to allow you to book a room through us. So what has happened is basically the scope has just jumped. And we didn't consider that at all in the paper. So it's very difficult to unpack these things because they just influence each other. It's like, where do I stop and where do my real identity stop and my digital identity begin? Is there two different things, or are we basically the same thing? Is who I present to be online really me, right? Is it more me than who I think I am? But what we were concerned about, and this is where we had a lot of conversations about this before this became some kind of a paper. What we were concerned about is, what if you choose to be somebody else, right? So let's say that I was a person that bought a lot of food, but today I'm on a diet, right? So all this, let's keep it to targeted advertising. All targeted advertising is about these hamburgers and pizzas and other greasy food. So I can't, it makes change more difficult for me. I can't change because of who I am. That's this identity that I used to have is somehow cemented in my digital traces and creates the reality that of me today. The gym I used to go to had televisions in front of the running lanes, and they ran commercials about burgers all the time. Is this the targeted audience? Is this a good match for your commercial? Yes. Does it help the audience, however, accomplish their goal? Not so much.
Thank you so much for this, Cyril. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for this wonderfully clear typology. I was merely wondering how much all this is specific to digital identities, because I think most of the categories that you describe may have non-digital identities, even for the digital voodoo doll. In the sense, okay, this is an AI that makes the predictions, but I mean, for ordinary brains, ordinary brains also do that. I mean, you have encountered a couple of people, and then because you showed some features, and then you're prejudiced. So it seems to me that there are fairly simple equivalents to your category. So at the end of the day, I was wondering what exactly is specific, or as what
what is difference is, let's say you have met, I'm originally from Macedonia, and most likely I'm the only Macedonian you have ever met, because we are 2 million people. So, you know, so then you have a bad experience with me, and you're going to be a little bit wary with the other Macedonian. And the thing is that, you know, you can adapt, right? You can learn that, okay, I'm treating this person as if they're going to do this, but they're not doing it. So I will change my behavior. It's much easier to let's say, I have had, okay, Macedonians, they have been thieves, right? And the one Macedonian I've met, they have committed thievery in my shop. So there comes this other person with this passport. So I expect thievery. But then thievery doesn't happen. So I'm going to feel guilty about this, and I'm going to try to make it up to this person about, sorry, our lights are automatically switched off at 6. I need to fix this. There we go. So as a person, you are right. I mean, we do make models of people in our head because it's just a very efficient way to know how to handle different people. But the difference between these models and the digital models is I can change that. Whereas if I have a prediction model, right, I cannot change the prediction model. Tweaking the prediction model is extremely expensive, difficult, and I'm not going to do it for just the one user when I have millions of them. So think of it this way. Netflix has predicted that it's a bad idea that you like rom-com movies. Good luck getting out of the rom-com cloud. So you have spent two weeks feeling particularly mopey and watched a bunch of 90s rom-com movies. I do this, yeah, no judgment. And then for the next 2 weeks, I have to deal with the fact that all I'm going to see anywhere are this type of movies. And imagine that you don't have a way to kind of switch that off. So that's the difference. The difference is humans learn very fast. Prediction models are created and nobody can change them afterwards. You virtually have to delete it in order to build another one. And is the service who created it going to be, you know, open to that suggestion? That's the question.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks.
That's maybe partly it goes to the direction of the question that Mal asked at some point, namely that in the model that you are studying, since the kind of data that is being gathered is not exactly, you know, controlled because everything is, so this makes it very different from the gathering made by public institutions, where public institutions, public websites are super careful about what they are taking in, etc., etc. Yeah. So even online, I mean, the distinction that is here at stake, I think, is not the chronological distinction between before and now, but even online, the distinction is between the public and private institutions. But this only shows the fact that private institutions are really do have access to many things.
You
right?
say that, but let's say I'm a country and I'm interested in image recognition for deceptive behavior, and this is the European Union's ETIAS system at the moment. They don't say they will deploy it, but they are flirting with it on the webpage. And so it's like you present yourself at the outer border of the EU, and your presence, the image of you basically is matched against the pattern of deceptive behavior. So how is that pattern created? Well, it was sold to them by a company, a private entity. Where did the company get the data to create the pattern in the first place? Who knows, right? So you are going to be taken out of the queue and put in the small room, and they're going to ask you additional questions to verify whether or not you're really going to be deceptive. Are you up to no good, right? Why are they going to do that? Because the AI system flagged you as you are matching the pattern of deceptive behavior. Why? Because people similar to you have exhibited in your situation with your pattern, well, basically characteristics, they have later been proven to be drug smugglers or people smugglers or, you know, visa violators or whatever you want. So then the question is, what is similar to you? So who am I? I identify as an engineer. I identify as an academic. I identify as a woman, right? But is this the similarity matrix that is applied? Not necessarily. It could be women who wear orange earrings on Tuesdays. But this information, you say, you are correct that, you know, public institutions are a little collect more cleaner data, right? Verified data that really does apply this really does apply to this person. This is their name. They really are that gender. They really are that you know, age and so on. But that data is matched against the pattern that is created by a private institution, which we have no control whatsoever what type of a data they have used to create this information in the first place. There was this very beautiful investigative journalism piece that a South Germany TV station ran on software that predicts that predicts success for interview candidates. So there is a footage of the interview that's matched against the pattern of, is this going to be a good employee or bad employee? Is this going to be a person who is communicative or not communicative or whatever you want to classify people, right? And they found out that the good employees are people who wear glasses and have bookshelves in the background. So basically that was the pattern that matched.
Okay, but yeah, I normally wear glasses, just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's just yeah. But seriously, what are you suggesting really that public institutions pretend to be clean and nice, and then behind our backs they are using data gathered by private institutions?
Yes, I'm not saying that they're doing it intentionally. I'm saying that you procure services from a private institution, and what the service they offer is, I can give you the prediction model. And are we asking in detail where did this data for the prediction model came from? So I cannot claim public institutions do this or public institutions do not do this, right? But there is nothing in the regulations that I am aware of that require them to. And that's the question, right? Are they required to check how this particular prediction model was built? Because what is being sold typically is how many mistakes it makes, how many false positives it has, how many false negatives it has, right? But what type of data is it built from? Where does this data come from? Is there a law that basically regulates this? I'm not aware of it. So nobody does anything evil intentionally, basically. I would be very surprised that, people go ahead and say, now we're going to use this dirty data. But it's more the case of, people are not necessarily aware of where they need to pay attention and to what. Because a lot of the time people don't even know that machine learning doesn't mean that the algorithm is learning, but that it is an algorithm that builds a prediction model that we then apply.
Okay, and what does it mean for, sorry, whomever wants to jump in, please do. I'm just trying to, explore the things that I'm interested in, obviously. What does it mean for further teaching? I mean, what should be explained to whom in order to maybe, make it better?
I think from my experience from teaching these topics, right? For people who don't have a computer science background, they don't understand that the concepts of fairness or trust or equality, that they are complex concepts or privacy. Privacy is a very good one. What is privacy? Privacy has a definition. Privacy is basically a space in which you can act without unwanted scrutiny, right? But computer scientists do not have access to this literature. To them, privacy means what they have heard. What they would typically have heard is security. So that means that as long as I keep your bank account details safe, privacy is accomplished. As long as I cannot identify you as a person, as an individual in this data set, privacy is accomplished, right? I remove your name from this data set. There are many women that are 42 years old. So you're one of many. There, boom, privacy done, right? So people in computers with a computer science background do not understand that there are these complex societal humanistic concepts, that there is a lot of work that has gone into them. And they would just attach a particular very narrow meaning to this concept and run with it. People who are with non-computer scientist backgrounds, they typically apply the words that we have abused in computer science as if they are applied to human agents. So what we're talking about here is learning, right? Or seeing, or example. So they would not know that the only information that can be processed by a computer is either a logic formula, graph, or a table. Nothing else gets passed. And that basically then gets transformed into a long row of numbers. Everything is a vector of numbers. People would not know that when a computer sees a picture, what they're actually seeing is a very long list of numbers, each of them being a pixel. So we basically unravel the picture, and it's a bunch of pixels, and what we are looking for is pattern amongst those pixels. We are not looking for, a face or ear or nose or woman. We are just looking at patterns in a bunch of pixels that are just aligned like a string. They would not know that learning actually is a complete abuse of term. And what I mean by a learning algorithm is I have taken a bunch of training data, I have found a pattern in it, which I call prediction model. Is just a formula that resembles the real thing. And when I apply new vector of representation to that formula, I get a label. And that is what the machine learning is about. People imagine things such as the algorithm itself changes. Yeah. They use the concept of learning as if it is for people, and then they kind of take all that suitcase meaning into it and apply it to artifacts, which are mathematical functions.
Okay, wow. Is among these words that you just mentioned, learning, etc., do you put intelligence also in?
Absolutely, yeah. The choosing, decision-making. We had a very interesting discussion last week. So basically in computer science, decision-making is the model that we take from rational decision-making from economy. There is a list of options. There are properties for each of the options. There is an objective function, apply, right? Whereas in a lot of fields of political science or humanity, that is not a choice at all, right? If there is an objective function and rationality is assumed, then you have to maximize it, then you don't have a choice. You're just maximizing a particular function.
Well, that's tricky then, because it really means that there's a vocabulary problem, Cyril.
Well, and you mentioned that you guys want to run some kind of an interdisciplinary course. And the only thing I can tell you is just give up on the fact that you're going to do a great job. You're not, because we don't know how to do that yet. There is not enough background information, but it is nonetheless a worthwhile job to do. And nobody will be able to do a good job unless there is a bunch of us doing a bad job first.
That is why I said that we are going to be a smooth seminar in roughly 20 years. So this is family too.
Yeah.
Cyril, you want to ask a question?
Yeah. Do you think of connections between your typology and legal distinctions, existing legal distinctions? Yes. And so that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, I mean, if your typology is fruitful, and I can see it's very interesting because it shows the different types of power that can be, the different things that, different ways that people may react to you. Do you think it could be used for kind of developing law about how to regulate AI?
Yeah, so we built it hoping that it will help the regularization, actually. And we do talk to lawyers occasionally. The thing is that a personhood, in the idea, what is a person and what is an identity in the common sense of the word and the legal sense of the word are completely different things. So personhood is much more complex in law than it is in our everyday lives. And we did not involve legal personhood here because that would have been a completely orthogonal dimension in a way. And honestly, we didn't have a lawyer among us to go further and explore it, overly honest science methods, right? So that would have required the legal scholar to help us explore. It is definitely, I think, a worthwhile dimension to explore because legal personhood is just super complicated, but also formal. And, it's there is a typology there that exists in a way, but that typology does not extend to digital identities, as it were, right? You are a person, whatever legal personhood applies to you, it applies to you as a person or to you as an institution. And if somebody steals your identity, basically, what happens then in the eyes of the law? And the law, as far as I know, has difficulty dealing with this type of situations. Like it is very much behind on, okay, somebody stole my Netflix account and then watched a bunch of movies with, or even better, again, this is another investigative journalism story of, I think, Washington Post, but I'm not sure. They wanted to check the TikTok algorithm, whether or not it identifies depressed people and serves them depressing content. I think that was the topic. So what if somebody stole my phone and just searched depressing TikTok videos for 2 weeks. And then now all of a sudden I'm exposed to this depressive content. And as a result on that, my health situation is worsened. So I want to sue this person for, you know, watching TikTok, particular type of TikTok videos on my phone and thus inhabiting my digital identity. I don't have no idea.
I'm very ignorant about all of this, but for example, is it somebody reprehensible if you're stolen your email account? On the people who steal your email account, if it's not an institutional account, if it's a Gmail account or anything, what does the law says? What does
I have no idea
about this? Because I mean, it can be very extreme private, so it's clearly kind of breaking into your personal life. But I have no idea about what happens in kind of situations.
I mean, there was this interesting case of, let's say you and I have exchanged private messages on Facebook, right?
Yep.
Of a particular variety. Okay, this is a specific example from I have witnessed. So a man married to woman A sends salacious messages on Facebook to woman B. Woman B takes screenshot of such messages and posts them to her Facebook profile, tagging woman A. The question is, she does damage to the reputation of the man in question. Is she the one who owns these messages, or was the guy who was posting them on them, and what happens here? It's like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think the law has risen up to these digital realities yet. But
okay, thanks. There is a
Dimitris had some question and then he changed his mind, I think.
Hi. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to make a comment on the discussion a little bit before the very last question about the AI part and the legal aspects and so on. And because this is part of some work that I am recently doing with some legal colleagues this time. So I'm a computer scientist. So one comment that I would like to make is that the discussions are actually difficult per se. I mean, it's not only just a matter of, let's say, producing something at the end, but it's first a matter of understanding each other. Although I am not really sharing the, let's say, the pessimism of interdisciplinarity. I worked quite a lot with people from different sciences. For me, the main problem, which is actually now, let's say, echoed quite a lot in AI, is that people are not really thinking of interdisciplinarity as a way to, let's say, approach each other, but as a way to perform to do what they already do, but just in a different context. And this, of course, is not going to work. So I agree on that respect. On the other hand, I think that the current extended applicability of AI that you also discussed very nicely shows us that the problem is there and will not go away, actually. I mean, so we have to deal with that, wanting or not, with difficulties, with failures, and so on. And I think that there is a lot of ground to be there. And just to add a personal experience for whatever it worth, this year I started teaching a course in a master that we have in political science, dealing with issues more or less what you described, data privacy, and a little bit of misinformation and all this. So my experience was in general very positive, I have to say, even that I have to, you know, really struggle sometimes to try and explain to people AI concepts without using formulas at all, but it was of interest. So I think that it's an interesting road ahead. And I think what you describe actually for me is a positive sign of interdisciplinarity, not the other way around.
I don't want you to take the impression that I'm a pessimist about this. I mean, regardless how we feel about it, the fact remains it's necessary. I mean, we are not going to make any progress if we just kind of stick to our own disciplines and only do, okay, this is what I know, I'm not going to do anything else, bye-bye, or get informed about anything else. So basically, I just wanted to be, and I'm a bit cynical as a person, I guess. I wanted to be clear that you need to get into this with eyes open. And the biggest problem of AI, if you spend a lot of time in AI, what you actually kind of get transformed, the part of you that gets transformed is the part which looks at, you very clearly separate problem from context of the problem, let's put it that way. So you don't take things for granted in a way. What I mean by that is the best way to clean a floor is not necessarily only vacuum cleaning. If you put this little robot to do this action, after a while, the floor ends up being cleaned. You learn that to fly from A to B does not necessarily mean to fly like a bird. A plane uses completely different, this is not an AI metaphor, but you get the picture. So the reason why I was focusing on the problems of interdisciplinarity, and I'm doing that because I think I'm in a group that is already decided to do that, interdisciplinarity, is because we should, the way things fall apart, in my opinion, is when you assume that everybody is on the same page in the room, and people typically are not, and it takes a little bit of, getting to know each other period before people agree on what concepts are what. Because we use the same word, but they mean different things across the fields. And that is by no means to say that I don't think that it should be done at all. It is hard, but it is hard at the beginning, and every time it gets better and better and better. So I myself do interdisciplinary work, and I don't plan to stop anytime soon. So for me, it's just a question of how can we learn from each other. And okay, there are these steps that have to be crossed. How do we cross these steps so we can get to the good part? There is, of course, interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity. There are two different things. When you are working with someone else and you both have different fields, and we are just communicating very clearly, but I'm doing the tech part, you're doing the, law part. None of us is doing two disciplines at the same time, but then we know how to talk to each other. We know how I can give you what you need and you can give me what I need. I'm not a pessimist, definitely. I keep doing interdisciplinary work. Okay. I'm not quitting anytime now.
Just to say that it was not a characterization. It was just a reaction to the... so I didn't mean that...
I got you completely clearly.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to stress the fact of what you said, that I think this is where things lie ahead, and it's interesting to have this kind of exchange.
It's true. Yeah, Andreas, question or a comment? You're muted though. Muted.
We don't hear you. We don't hear you.
We still don't hear you. I don't hear him, do you?
No, we don't hear you for some reason.
An AI, I read on lips.
His digital voodoo doll is not...
It worked.
I think that you'll have to write down your question, maybe, or remark.
I'm sure this was the best question, but...
Oh, that's tricky. So take your time to write it down, maybe.
No logic. That's the question. Yes, this was a very weird paper. It had no logic whatsoever in it. It was a very unnatural experience for me. But I recommend everybody tries it, particularly the logicians.
Okay, because I don't know. Okay, well, it's not going to work, obviously, sound-wise. Pity. I'll just concerning what Dimitri said. Is it true? I mean, how to? Have you ever been into this situation where you had the impression that people are not doing what Dimitri said, namely they are not just taking elements from their discipline and trying to try to confirm them in your discipline? when does it happen? When does it break, really? And the question is actually to everyone, because it's tricky everywhere.
So my experience has been with some logicians, Andreas. And the idea was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And just this is how it is. It works. I don't need to do anything else. Specifically, this has been a particularly weird panel that I was part of with logic programming people, and we were discussing explainability of artificial intelligence. And then basically their solution for explainability was stop using machine learning, use symbolic learning, and that's it. That solves everything. And I was just like, oh God, no, have you seen a logic program? Nothing is explainable. I mean, you can trace back information from it in order to build an explanation that's meaningful to someone, but you still need to do that. It's not done. But it was basically that type of a discussion. But this is an exception.
I see. Because, yeah, and anyway, and Dimitri, what did you think about? What were your traumas? Why did you mention it? You have unmuted.
Okay. Well, my background is in what we call today data science in general. So I'm a data person. So with that capacity, I had the chance or the curse, I don't know, to work with different people who were producing data in different projects in different aspects. So for me, the discussion today, and this touches quite a lot, for example, the discussion about ethics, about explainability, about transparency in AI, has started a little bit in a strange way, if you like, in the sense that we somehow started, let's say, using AI, I mean, at a social level, or things that we named AI, because this is also important, at a level that was, let's say, not compatible for me with the scientific advances. So we rushed somehow into using things before making sure that we, let's say, understand, that we can cope, that we can even justify. So I think that part of that causes a discussion that is somehow should have been there before. And
going fast and breaking things.
Sorry?
Going fast and breaking things.
That's fine. If we are breaking things because we are going fast, that's fine for me. The issue sometimes is that we have different expectations. So if we acknowledge that okay, we are going too fast and things might not work, or we might not understand, and so on, that's excellent. But sometimes we think we understand. Okay, and for me, this is part of, as I said, of the discussion of what exactly do we name AI today, right? Because there are things that were around for a very long time, and suddenly today people are naming it, labeling it AI because it is trendy, and we go through with that. It's you know, yeah. So that's why I said that some of the issues I've dealt with before. So, for example, data privacy. Yeah, sure, we were working with data. We were not mixing this with necessarily with security. But yeah, when we were trying to explain this to people, people would actually understand security, as very well Marija said before. And for me, what was always a struggle to say, okay, but no, we are not doing that. We are just dealing with the privacy issue. So it's.
So I think you have a good point there, that what we call AI is very, you use the same term, but I realized that a lot of the public discourse around AI is not about research, it's about this product or technology, or basically product. It's the product, right? The product that is being sold under that term AI. When I talk about AI, I always talk about research because that's what it is to me. But then the public discourse is entirely built around this product of AI. And they don't care about the research part whatsoever. I mean, it's too complicated to explain. And you go tell people, okay, look, AI has existed since 1956, and they kind of look at you funny, but yeah, but that's good old fashioned, right? It's like, I am struggling to take good old fashioned AI as anything but pejorative. But then, of course, if you look at first order logic, right? First order logic was, sorry if there are no logicians in here who are going to be completely lost by this conversation, but first order logic is the basis of the SQL language, which is basically relational databases, which made everything possible in terms of storing of data. And this, they opened the gate wide for what is big data today. Banks, fintech, records, digitalization in general. So at the basis of this was using these very formal methods. And then people tried to improve on first order logic by using simpler logics. And so this logic talk is only because you brought it up. So I hope you're proud of yourself. And then people don't think of first order logic as AI today, or databases as AI, or anything of that like that as AI, because it just became common, and there is we learned how to do this particular task without having any intelligence whatsoever. And I think AI itself is figuring out how to do tasks that require intelligence of people, but without using intelligence whatsoever. So I don't know whether somebody should give up on trying to agree on what we call AI and what we don't call AI. And a lot of the confusion does come from the naming of things. It's like, it's very difficult to say, okay, yes, this is a normal computer program. This is an AI program. The line is here.
Oh, this is new for me, to be honest. I didn't know that it was that unsteady. Wonderful. Any other questions or remarks? Because we kind of went.
Yeah, I just had a very small comment. I think that trying to link all this, so those kind of typologies that you make, that are a way to clarify all the different ways in which we can get involved in AI and what happens online. So trying to make the connection with legal issues is very important, because many people say that in the legal domain, I mean, the law is just here to try to regulate society. And when there is no big problem, lawyers will not make any specific law. And so as far as I can see, we have many small problems online, many private small problems, because of all this thing with digital identities. So for example, if somebody steals my email account, this is a small problem. So this is many problems are going to frame our life, but we don't have a big problem that would force lawyers to try to create specific concepts that are adapted for all people. And so my worry is that these concepts are going to be created just if big companies do need litigation, something like this, and then some specific concept needs to be created for their needs. And so my worry is if you don't do anything, I mean, some legal concepts will eventually be created, but will they just be fitted to the needs of the commercial needs and financial needs of companies? Otherwise, well, clearly there is some regulation that is needed, but it's just about small problems concerning citizens, and I don't think this would be seen as major issues that need a special concepts to be created.
I believe the political scientists call this view determinism.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an example, for example, so when you discuss about patenting, So you think, okay, then a patent is going to identify a specific discovery, and no, it's not true. I mean, you just patent things, and lawyers, for them, it's not a problem if a patent is not written correctly, if it's not, you don't identify precisely things, so they don't do anything till there is a conflict about a particular patent, and then they're going to inquire if there is a conflict to be arbitrated. But otherwise, they don't do anything. So I think we should not expect, I mean, lawyers just to do the job for us so that it fits our lives and needs. They will just do something if there are some major things at stake. And at the end of the day, the legal concepts are very important for our daily lives.
But I mean, okay, so lawyers need to do their job, which is realize that there are aspects of society through which crime can be committed. There are new crimes, basically, that need to be defined as crimes, right? And regulations that apply to them. Because identity theft was not, digital identity theft was not, would not be a crime in 1725 because there is no digital identity, right? So stealing your computer would not have been a crime until computer was defined as property, and then it falls under the laws of stealing your property and all that stuff. But I don't think that, I mean, the law works different than computer rules and constraints, because a computer constraint is absolute in the sense that if these are the conditions in which the constraint apply, and I have checked that the conditions apply, the constraint is applied. So if let's take as a specific example, speeding. I'm taking driving classes now, so it's very acute for me. And so then the rule is speed limit is 60, which means you should drive between 60 and 65. And, you know, in principle, if there is a camera, then I should drive below 60, because if I'm driving above 60, the camera is going to trigger a fine for me. But if there isn't a camera, then to obey the rule means to drive between 60 and 65. And if there is a police person checking, then if I'm driving between 60 and 65, I'm not going to be fined. And it's a completely different than saying, well, on the other hand, having that same law applied to driverless cars means that driverless car can never accelerate above 60, because that's the speed limit, that's the hard constraint. So this car will never, ever accelerate above 60. So then you have taken something that is a law and then instantiated to a specific interpretation. So lawyers cannot build the constraints for us. The reason these are laws and they're at the specific, they exist at the level of specificity in which they exist is because there is an understanding that there is context dependency, extenuating circumstances. Yes, you were speeding, but you had a person who was dying in your car, and it was much more important for them to be reached to the hospital, gotten to the hospital, than the safety of the road, right? Temporarily, the law was suspended. Whereas computer rules, you cannot temporarily suspend them, right? If the car is programmed to never accelerate above 60, it never will. If this automatic speeding checkpoint is going to detect a speed of 60.05, it's still above 60 mathematically, therefore you're going to get a fine. So the lawyers it's not their job, in my opinion, to determine these constraints that we want to implement. They just define what is a crime and what is not a crime, who can commit a crime, who is liable when this action has been, how do we decide who is liable, and all that stuff. But then they're not going to solve our problem for, you know, I need to make sure that this particular, I don't know, video content platform does not show this type of videos to this type of users.
Okay, thanks.
Just to add one small comment on that. So first of all, as I said, I co-supervise a PhD with a legal colleague on issues around transparency of AI in healthcare. So I would like just to share a little experience from there, which is that actually lawyers care about that not in the same way that we do. So as it was already described very nicely, and I fully agree, they don't care about the exact conditions we will set, but they care about having, for example, explainability in AI-based medical decisions, because this creates or this matches with the liability of the doctor and so on, which is actually their concern. So how do we manage that and how we integrate with that is a really interesting problem for me. They will not be interested for the same things, but in my experience, they are. So there would be some push from this side also for regulating or introducing elements or norms that would guide, let's say, AI-based production. And this is nice, and this is interesting. And so not everything is left, not everything is too small. And of course, not everything, as in other things, need actually a law to regulate that. Okay, as it was said, some things will be regulated internally. For example, if your email account is stolen, yeah, you have to deal with the company that hosts it to take it back. Of course, what happens with the damages afterwards is another legal issue.
Okay, wonderful. I stop recording here.